Welcome to another episode of We Don't Die, where my goal is to give you evidence that although our bodies will disappear, we survive physical death. I'm your host, Sandra Champlain, author of the best-selling book called We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. Today on our show, I get to introduce you to Lesley Lupo, coming to us from Tucson, Arizona. Lesley is a licensed NLP therapist with more than 25 years of experience as an intuitive therapist. She has seen thousands of clients all over the world and has conducted numerous workshops in areas as diverse as relationships and energy work. For the last 20 years, she has worked in the Metaphysical Department of the Canyon Ranch Health Resort in Tucson, both as a psychic and for 3 years as the Spiritual Programs Coordinator. In addition to counseling clients, Lesley teaches a relationship workshop called Manifest the Real Deal, Have a Best Friend, Best Lover for Life, and divides her time creating mosaics and jewelry, meditating by her pond, keeping bees, and growing organic veggies. She sounds like a fun lady, doesn't she? She's also the author of the upcoming book, Every Breath is Precious. Her website is www.lightthepath.com, or you can find out more about her at wedon'tdieradio.com and click on episode 110. Lesley Lupo, welcome to We Don't Die Radio.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm very honored that you contacted me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Absolutely. Lesley, there's so much more about you that I could have said in the bio, but I wanted you to tell your story in your own words about how you got into this, magnificent work you're doing. And, what do you know about life after death? Is that a big question or what?
It is. It all started in March of '88. I was working at a dude ranch, and I was the vice president of operations. At that point, you bounce around a lot between different departments to help whoever's needed. And one of the cowboys was not feeling well, so I jumped into the wrangling department and helped out. So at the end of the day, we were unsaddling, waiting for the last two rides to come in, and two horses had snuck out the gate and run down to the hay barn with their saddles on, which is dangerous for the horses. They can get hurt if they roll, and it's a problem. So I ran down to the hay barn with two halters to grab the horses and come up. And I don't know if people know horses, but they're not like on television where they're just so sweet and like a puppy,
right.
Especially a large herd. We had like over 100 horses.
Wow.
But the thing about them is there's never enough food for them. No matter how much you put them up, they will eat to their fill, but they're still panicky. So everybody's jammed in eating at the end of the day. And I had to try to wiggle between horses to bring them in. And at first I thought I was really lucky because they were standing right next to each other. But as it turned out, it was hard for me to make it through where all the saddle and the stirrups were. So at one point, I was clucking and poking them, and they just kind of looked at me like, hey, you're smaller than me and I'm hungry, and ignored me. At one point, I turned around to try to push myself backwards. And at that moment, my mind or my consciousness, my soul, popped out of my body and stood about 6 feet away watching it. Now, I didn't faint or anything, but I was really shocked. I remember thinking, what? But I couldn't even think of words as I watched myself continue to try to wiggle in between those two horses. And all of a sudden, one of the horses on my left, me, the soul body, not me, the person in the horses, screeched, and the 6 or 7 horses around me bolted. At that time, I spun, and my right arm went through the stirrup of the horse, and because I was dragging on him when he was trying to run with the other horses, he first hit me with his head. He kind of head-butted me sideways, which caused me to go crashing into the corner of concrete and metal, the hay barn, and I dropped like a sack of rocks.
Wow.
I'm watching all this with the awareness. I didn't feel, my body was screaming. I didn't feel a thing. I didn't feel any nervousness. I didn't feel any despair. I didn't feel any pain. But it was almost like dispassionately watching it, like, wow, like what's going on? And it just took a few seconds to be over, but I knew I was dead. And I knew it. There was never a doubt in my mind, yet my first reaction was to start giggling. I remember thinking, this is it. This is what everyone's so afraid of. I'm still here, and I'm still thinking. And I felt such peacefulness and love and freshness. It was kind of like if you could picture taking off a body girdle that's 4 sizes too small, how fresh you would feel.
Oh, I would imagine, yeah.
Like when you're walking around in a towel after a shower, you feel so fresh. And I felt like it was almost like every cell had separated and this beautiful breeze was going through. And I felt such just peacefulness and completeness, and that this is the way it should be, this feeling. And, I'm a very curious person. So the next thing I thought was, wow, what do I look like? So I looked down at myself, and I was still in my blue jeans and my boots and everything. And it wasn't see-through or anything like that, but I did notice it was almost like this little tiny mist was rising off of me, and the mist was just a little tiny bit of blue, and this mist that was rising off of me. The other thing I noticed was how intensely accurate my vision was. When we're staring at something, we look at the center, and then by the time we get out a few feet on either side into the edges of our peripheral vision, it's gone. And that didn't happen. It was as if everything within my peripheral vision was perfectly in focus, and yet wasn't overwhelming, like too much information. The same thing with sound. I heard every little bird. I've heard every little scurry of a lizard, The horses were chomping again. I could hear their woofing breath as they kind of grabbed the alfalfa. And so I just stood there marveling at everything. And then down by the bottom of the big pen, the holding pen, I saw the cowboys, both rides were back, so they opened the gate. And I felt this really sweet nostalgia, like, oh, I know what they're doing. I've done that. Like it was almost like going back to a merry-go-round and watching children ride on it and remembering how thrilling it was when I was little. That kind of just happiness. And they came in and they started up, got the guests in, closed the gate, started towards the unsaddling part, and saw the boss's wife laying face down in manure and raced over. And I was just a few feet from them, and they flipped me over and started trying to resuscitate me. And no matter how much I screamed, please don't, I'm fine, they kept trying. And 2 of the guests had gotten down, and they were both doing the CPR together. And one man that was doing the breath kept watching his watch. And then after whatever minutes, they said it was 6 or 7 minutes, they stopped, and they still couldn't get breath. And the cowboys later told me that my skin was pure gray and my lips were the color of my blue jeans. And one of the men sat back and said, go get Bob, she's gone. So at that point, it was interesting because I began to let go of being in Tucson, but Tucson just started to fade. I know a lot of people have talked about feeling like they were lifted up or above. I mean, I wasn't feeling like I was standing on the ground, but just like maybe a foot above. But it's almost as if this world started emerging. Tucson started fading, and another world came in with it was an oak forest. It was a very thick oak forest. And my impression was, I'm just going to another level. Like, I've studied energy and I know the magnetic field and the color spectrum and the sound spectrum. And I felt like I was being moved to a different part of those spectrums, outside what we normally see, because I got the impression that it was just me closing my eyes and waking up and being on a different plane, but in the same area. And it was a beautiful oak forest. And all of the crisp alertness that I had downstairs is what I call earth, and upstairs is what I call heaven. All that crispness was a bit gone. I felt like, you wake up a little groggy because you had 2 glasses of wine the night before.
Yes.
Just groggy. I was kind of like trying to get my sea legs, so to speak. And everything was so intensified as far as the beauty and the peacefulness. All I could feel was this extraordinary level of selfless love. I know that we've had speakers here in Tucson, and a few of them have talked about the unconditional love. And for me, I just use a different word, because the time that I feel it on earth, if you've ever given someone a present and they're opening it up and they look at you and the look in their eyes, it was a perfect thing, or like to give a gift like that to a child and look at the joy they feel when you hit the bullseye. We get this like rush through our bodies that just makes us feel so alive and loved, because it's a selfless gift of giving someone something will bring them great joy. And it's that kind of feeling, that selfless love. And the other thing I was amazed at was it was a very thick forest. Now, I live in a forest here in Tucson. There's not many of them, but for some reason I have a house here. And there's a great deal of shade and shadow. And I noticed that there was no shadows. It was as if I walked up and I was looking at the ferns and the trees and the bushes, and it was as if they were lit from within. And the other thing I can say is this evening, when the sun is setting, go out and put a tree between you and the sun. And when you see the sunlight coming through the leaves, that's maybe 10% of what it is upstairs, but you get that feeling of how things are all lit from within. And I kept like marveling, like just touching things. I walked over there was a little river behind me, so I walked over and there were rocks and there was a lovely splashing sound. And I saw some ferns dripping in and these spiky flowers and butterflies, and there were birds flitting around and singing. And then I turned back, that was to my right, I turned back and I saw over on my left a little opening in the forest, and there was a table that kind of looked like lapis lazuli, that blue lapis, and chairs around it. And I was watching the table, and it was again as if things were still coming through. There was people standing around there, a group of people. So I walked over and everybody greeted me. And at that point, it was really the first time where I got a really strong sense of something familiar, like, wait a minute, I know these people, I know this place. And I sat down. There was 11 other people, and there were 5 women and 6 men, and we sat around this big oval table. In the middle of the table were some wavy lines that kind of looked like when you're driving and you see those heat waves, because they were just wavy. I really couldn't see people on the other side of the table. I could see just really the people around me. And because they were I was so groggy, it took me a while to really process. Well, I don't know what a while is. But I wasn't as sharp as I was downstairs, where everything was bing, bing, bing. I noticed the woman on my right, and I recognized her because when I was really, really little, I used to see what I called angels in my bedroom, in the garden, and all around me. Every once in a while, not all the time, but every once in a while, it would almost be like something kind of kept me still, and then I would see this woman who was next to me, and her name was Nina. It popped in my mind, and I wasn't sure if I was remembering it or if it was telepathic. And then I looked to my, one more thing. Before that, before I saw them, me again, what do I look like? And I had this long dress on, and it was a deep, deep Prussian blue, and it was very elaborately embroidered with little gold. And my hands looked like babies, like I was maybe 20 years old. It was just very young, and I had big, really large, kind of like almost like nickel and quarter size freckles, just a few, but they were really light. And then I was like touching I have short curly hair. Short hair? I like long hair, I was thinking. And so when I walked over to the table, everyone was so harmoniously, beautifully dressed. They looked like felted wool, or they looked like silk or cottons, beautiful embroideries. And everyone, again, looked very, very young. It looked like college kids, except for their eyes. There was so much soul and wisdom in the eyes. And I looked over on my right. There was a gentleman sitting, and he had long hair and a beard, but it was interesting because everyone was so harmoniously dressed but him. And his name was Raul. And he had this brilliant, bright, ultraviolet shirt on. And then he had these pants on that were this kind of garish, orangey brown. And I was thinking to myself, well, now wait a minute. You've got all the colors of the universe to work with. Who dressed you? I was like thinking, well, man, they must, not even upstairs. I can't dress themselves. No, I'm kidding.
You're funny.
But, well, the funny part is this. Rao is actually in Ayurvedic, which I knew nothing about this until actually a couple months ago. Rao is a planet in Sanskrit, and Nina is Pisces in Sanskrit. And on that date I had the accident, Rao was going through Nina, which happens every 20 years. And the other thing, Rao's color is ultraviolet, and his stone is hessonite garnet, which is orangey brown garnet. So
that weird.
It finally made sense to me after 26 years. I figured, okay, that makes sense. But I sat down, and Nina and Rao were the only ones that talked to me, and they explained that I had gone down on a mission with my soul group, and this was the remnant that had stayed behind. There was 10 that were stayed behind originally, and 20 went down. And I had contracted to come up when I was 21 with another person in the soul group. We were just going to come down, shift consciousness, and bring in a level of forgiveness and begin to open the door to a huge shift of consciousness. And she explained to me that between the years of 45 and 65, with a few years on either side, the majority of very, very, very old souls had come down after the 2 world wars to help shift awareness and bring up consciousness. And I and another soul group person were supposed to pop back up at 21. But she said at the time, right before I was supposed to go, I turned and jumped my contract. She said, that's not a problem. You were a volunteer, and they don't mind any amount of help on Earth. But now you have a choice. You didn't contract to have 2 children. You have 2 children. You can stay up here. You do not have to go back to Earth. However, think of how it will impact the children. They will have, no problems either way, but you have a decision to make. You can go down to Earth, or you can stay up here. You have to think about this. And so Rao and I walked around a little, and I went to meditate in this cave behind a waterfall. He brought me to a place. He said, this is a place that you like to go for stillness. And when I went in, there was a very potent light being there. And as soon as I walked in, I recognized it to be Jesus. Now, the interesting thing is this accident came at a time in my life when I was basically agnostic, bordering on atheist. I had no interest in spirituality. I was a good person. I was a hard worker. I was a good mother. I was a good friend. But I just had no part. I was very science-minded, you know. I was not quite a materialist or atheist, but I was definitely not at all interested in any spirituality. I had left that behind due to a tragedy during college, and I just gave up on all that spiritual stuff and just went into work. And so me seeing someone like Jesus really did surprise me, because I wasn't, you know, a fan. I wasn't hating, but I just had no, I mean, I believed I believed at that time Jesus existed, etc. But it was really interesting because he had such a strong aura and such a loving aura. And we talked about forgiveness. And he actually had me lay down on this table that was like white. It was beautiful white marble. In fact, the whole inside of the cave was polished. It looked like it had been hand carved and polished. And little like symbols and ledges were put around there. But it was actually quite huge. It was probably like, you know, 40 feet by 40 feet. And he took a little bowl with white marble, and he had, I could smell rose and sandalwood, and he put them on all my chakras. And he said, you've done a lot of work. We want you to relax. I'm going to clear some stuff off of you. And so he put them on all my chakras, and then he also put it on my ankles and on my wrists. And we talked a little about forgiveness and self-forgiveness, and how difficult it is to accomplish what you feel a goal is when you're working part of a team. You have to be patient, you know, and understand that the goal is emerging and to be patient. And then I was peeking at him, so he put another big blob on my forehead and my third eye. And we were laughing, and he just told me to rest. And I think I napped, because I do remember closing my eyes. And then when I opened them, he was gone. So I climbed down, and Raul had pointed me out to the village saying, go over there when you're done. So I walked over, and I walked into this big, huge room, a building. You could put an indoor football dome inside the middle of it. It was that large. And the doors were wide open, and I walked in, and all the walls were covered with these tiny little, like a old dentist office, those little drawers.
Yeah.
And so I walked over, and I pulled open a couple of the drawers, and I was looking at different scrolls and different books. And again was that memory, like, oh, I could read this. It looked familiar, but I couldn't quite grasp what it was. And I put them back, and I walked along again, and then I saw there were these transepts on either side that were mimicking the room, had, again, huge, all this library. And I got about halfway through, and there was this little pedestal that looked like it was made out of bakelite, which is kind of like a white, glossy material, like the old telephones were made out of bakelite, but this was white. And another being, a big, really bright being, came up, and she was probably, if I'm 5'6", she was maybe 9 feet tall.
Oh my, okay.
And she had this beautiful robe on. It was indigo on the top that kind of went into white, like brilliant white at the hem. And she introduced herself, but I didn't catch her name because it was like a melody. And this was very telepathic. And I was listening to her, and she said, I only come when I'm called. Will you have a question? And I said, I'm sorry, I don't understand your name. And she laughed, which sounds like this beautiful laugh, you know, and kind of sounded like little glass chimes. And she then said, on earth they call me Saraswati. And so she said, what information? And what had happened was, right before my accident, I felt like I had really like just something had turned off my hope. And what had happened was I had come across an article that was written in honor of some anniversary, or maybe the lady was trying to go for an appeal, or, get out of prison. But the woman had these 3 little gorgeous baby girls. And I saw this picture of these 3 little children. My children were 3 years old and 1 year old. And you have all that mommy juice, and you're looking at this picture. Oh, sweet little babies. Mm-hmm. And then I read the story of this woman who took her children one by one and shot them because her girlfriends were going out and she couldn't. She was like 18 or 19 and she had 3 children already. She had a child every year for 3 years, and all with different fathers. And she tried to make it like someone had come in, and it knocked me for a loop that a mother could have a visceral connection to these babies and think of so little of them. And I just felt like, I would have taken those children. 100,000 people would have taken those children. You could have taken them and just given them up for adoption. And I just felt very frustrated when I read that. And I could feel myself just shut down. And then she explained it to me by saying, again, you have to keep your eye on the big picture. And you don't know, what their karma is to understand that. But at the end of the conversation, it was very hopeful. She kept showing me ways that to take a breath and keep your eye on the bigger picture. And she also was kind of bolstering me with just letting me get a feeling of, you've caught your breath. Now you can understand that is sometimes what happens in life. Because I was still going back to how could God let this happen? And her answer was basically, God didn't let it happen. Humans let it happen. So you can't blame spirit for this. This is showing that there's a lot of things that still need to be fixed.
Sure.
Just to be patient and recognize that not one person's going to change it all. It's going to be a group effort. And it reminded me of the random acts of kindness. Remember when that first started coming out?
Yes.
And she was very, very adamant that, like, stopping to let someone in line. If you've got 50 things and they have 1, letting them jump ahead of you. Or when we're going down from 3 lanes to 1 lane, the more polite people are about letting people in, the quicker you get through, rather than the people that race ahead and try to shoulder their way in. Just being polite. Whether they say thank you or not was irrelevant. So she kind of reminded me that. And then she also, just gave me, like, the light around her was so intense. And she also told me this was one of my favorite places to hang out because this was the Hall of Records. And we call it the Akashic Records. But upstairs they called it the Hall of Records, where everything was new or cutting edge was up there. And then, oh, no wonder I like encyclopedias so much online. And I spend so much time researching new scientific breakthroughs, whether it's physics or magnetic field or biology or health. I'm always reading. I like to keep abreast of what's cutting edge. And so then I finally went out, and Mina was waiting for me. So we went over to a smaller building, and she said, now we need to decide. And we had a really long talk. And the interesting thing was, it was the first time I began to feel tired. When we were walking over, I could feel tired, which I had never felt before. In fact, I had never felt any negative emotion. I didn't feel fear, and it's interesting how we have it so hardwired in our psyche with that reptilian, or what they call the animal brain, that fight or flight reflex, how totally, it's part of our dynamics as a human.
Yes.
And it's zero up there. All you have is all the high, happy, lovey parts of you, and all of the fear or conquering or competition or all the negativity, envy, greed. There was not even a quirk of that in me. So that was like, again, was so joyful.
Sure.
So we sat down and we talked about a few things. Again, they showed me in that little wavy line. Like when I first got up, they showed me the accident so I could understand why the horses panicked. If they had actually let out the herd boss, Montana was his name, and to be the herd boss of 100 horses, you got to be really cranky and mean and tough. And when they come down, all they have to do is put their ears back, and he nipped one of the horses, and that was the horse that screeched, and they all scatter like pigeons on a square, just bolt. And I just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And then we talked about my decision, what do I do up here? And what will I do back there? And the thing that she said I would do up there was really, really fascinating to me because it made a lot of sense from some of the people, so many of the people I meet as a therapist. What she explained to me was this, that throughout the evolution of human as a body, mind, spirit being, there have been very, very, very old souls which will incarnate to shift energy and to be teachers. In other words, you could be talking to the Safeway guy who's bagging your groceries, who's never going to stop doing that for his entire career, and he could be an extremely old soul who's having a nice, pleasant life, but he's just here to ground the energy, whereas other people are teachers. But the thing that's different is those old souls were put into families that supported that. Like the Dalai Lama, when he was born, the two monks found him from astrology predictions, and he saw at the age of 7 these two monks walking up, and he ran home and said to his mother, I have to go. He was like 6 or 7.
Right.
And his mother supported that, and then he went into a monastery where all he did was learn and train in the spiritual, to raise spiritual consciousness. So Nina said that around the 1860s, that the energy had shifted enough on Earth to where they started a new program, which was a volunteer program. So if you could picture like a bunch of old souls being around convents and ashrams and synagogues and temples and things like that, different mosques, different places of learned people that were spiritually learned, the children would be brought in, or they would be brought into families that honored that gift of the child. But what they did was she showed me kind of a little movie of me doing it, where I had a little tiny light about as big as a half a grain of rice, and I was looking over a map where you could see the light being clusters, and I was putting it right in the middle as far away from any light as I could, so that this older soul had to come in. And they were talking about, they said it's like bringing light into a shade. We're bringing light into the shade. Not like the shadow side like Jung talked about, or dark. It was just a place where there was not light. Just, people that hadn't been exposed to it yet. But they were totally alone. And at that point, they had to go inside and find that light within. So they may have been born into aggressive, hateful families. They may have been born into fear-based, fundamentalist type families. But they were born into families that did not recognize their soul level and taught them against it. So I call them Houdini Kids, because Houdini used to be blindfold, tied up, put into a bag, and thrown into the ocean.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He had to get himself out. So these beings, these light beings, had to go inside and find that light within them and say, no, this is not right. So for all the children that were born and felt like they landed in the wrong family, that and not in a superiority way, just like there's no one here for me to talk to about what I'm thinking or feeling. And people tend to squash that out of people. They can terrify you. I remember asking a priest one time that used to come to our house for dinner about the angels I saw. And he said, that they're devils, because he just thought I was an over-imaginative child.
Of course.
And so he took his water and he blessed it and he sprinkled it on me. He said, now if you're possessed by the devil, your skin will sizzle. And I was terrified.
Of course. He did.
But this had happened. I think he just thought I was an over-imaginative child and he wanted to, put the fear of God into me or whatever. Yeah, he was an Irish priest.
It worked.
Oh, it worked and it happened like a week after I had psychically seen a car accident before it happened, and then I thought I caused it. So I was just very confused, but I shut down. I just shut off anything that had to do with spirit, and I was about 7 or 8 when that happened. So people were born into, some of them were very loving families, but they just couldn't teach the PhD level of spiritual. Mm-hmm. They might have been in 6th grade in their evolutionary levels. So they had to find their own light within. I've had so many people in lectures when I'm doing this lecture come up to me and say, oh my gosh, I always thought I was a changeling. I was looking, and then you find, as soon as you find out, no, I'm okay you're okay like you, but I'm okay like me. That also brings across the idea that there's many different paths to the top of the mountain, as Buddha said.
Yeah, so, which is a good thing.
Yeah, and then
I felt very much alone with my thoughts and stuff like that. So
but now you've got your tribe around you, don't you?
Hell yeah.
See?
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, shouldn't say hell, but yes. Are you going to tell me? I have the sneaky suspicion that when you return back to your body, it was only minutes that you were out. I don't want to finish up your time goes by very quickly.
Okay, you're right.
Yeah.
I would say that they said I was gone. We don't know exactly. I left at 10 to 3. I looked at the clock. When they came in, it was 7 after 3. I don't know exactly when I died. It could have been a minute or 3. But they're saying probably the guesstimate was 10 to 12 minutes, minimum probably 12 to 15 maximum.
That's a long time, Lesley.
Well, the weird part is that if I show my CAT scans to neurologists like Eben and other neurologists, they all look at me and they go, you should be dead, you should be a vegetable. And it was just it seemed to have a little window of time in which I could come down and go back, because meeting people who have had head injuries, the people that I've met since my injury, and I was in the hospital like almost 3 months. I mean, it was a massive head injury. And, I had to go through all that coming back and getting back in my life and figuring out how to organize myself. Because I left an agnostic and came back going, okay, I got to go back to the light. I can't ignore it anymore,
Do you remember making the choice that you wanted to come back and be with your kids? And
Yes. We talked about it both ways. And the funny part was once I said, I looked at my children. They showed me my children. They showed me the things I would do down here. I'd go back into my psychology background, which is what I did. But when I finally said yes, then they started to stop me and they go, no, wait a minute. It's going to be really, really difficult. You're going to have a few years in which you are going to have to be very isolated. You're going to have to integrate this. And I'm thinking, few years? What's a few years? I mean, you're up in infinity. What's a couple of years,
Right.
And then I made the decision. And then finally I came and I went into a room in which I was seated, and then I felt like I was being compressed, like I was being squished into a sausage casing. And Raul was with me, and I gasped, and he stopped the process, and he said, remember, you don't have to go back. You can stay here. And I looked at him, and then I thought of my children again, and I thought, no, and what I could do to help down here with bringing hope, which was my next mission. And I said, no, I can do that. I'll go back. And that's when he said to me, remember, every breath is precious. And then I just went clunk and hit the ground.
Wow. What I find interesting too, Lesley, is that your soul stepped out of your body before the accident happened, is what you made it sound like, which, is that right?
Yes. But what's interesting is I used to work in a nursing home. When I first got out of college, I had a psych degree majoring in gerontology, and there were no hospices there. And there were so many people when we would call them and say, your mother or father's dying, they would say, call me when it's over. And my motto was, no one dies alone on my watch. So I would go in and sit with them. And I saw that time and time and time again, where the soul would leave even though the people were talking. It was almost like I could sense it standing there joyful and very happy as the body was dying. And sometimes it would be 2 to 3 minutes. One lady was about 8 or 9 minutes before I could sense that. And even my father died in my arms and my brother's arms. He had fallen and we were holding him. And I saw his soul jump out and I said, he's dying, don't pick him up. And Tommy looked at me and said, he's still talking. I said, no, he's over there. And then like another minute later, my dad passed. So I think that the soul, I'm not going to say every time, but I'm wondering how often that happens where the person pops out before the accident.
Yeah, I like the sound of that only after witnessing how my dad died of cancer. And someone had said to me, it's, because I witnessed incredible suffering. And somebody just said, it's possible his soul left the body, even though he seems to be, moving in pain and all that stuff. And I thought, I never heard that. And I thought, boy, I'm going to hang on to that hopefully that was the case.
I was screaming. My body, I shouldn't say I, because I was watching it.
Right.
I was not in my body, and Lesley was screaming bloody murder and getting trampled and smashed and in fighting, So it wasn't like it was like I was doped up out there. I watched me be brutally run over and die, but like I said, it was dispassionate. I couldn't witness something like that in this incarnate and have such objectivity.
Right.
It wasn't like, oh, well, it doesn't count. It was like understanding. It's like you get this immortal soul understanding of this bigger picture, and it's just part of letting go. The other thing that I just remembered, which I thought was odd, was I was asked when we were talking about the second time we sat down, Mina and Raul had asked me, do you want to remember this? Or do you want to not remember this? He said that with the trajectory that I was going, the life I was going to go into, they advised me to do it, but they also gave me the choice of remembering or not. And we talked about it, and I chose to do it. So I'm wondering how many people that maybe don't remember were given that choice.
That's interesting. Yeah. There's lots of people, even my sister met someone who died on an operating table but didn't have any experience of seeing the light or seeing relatives or whatever. And maybe it's possible that we do get a choice to remember or not remember. Huh. Very interesting. Now, how about you being psychic? Did you find that after you healed if you went into this being a borderline atheist, even though you had these things happen as a kid that, you had it in there, something must have been magnified that you decided to go into this as a career or make it part of your career?
Well, the thing is, the first time I shut off my intuition or my psychic part, which you can shut off, was when I had that priest and that accident when I was 7 or 8. The second time was when I was supposed to die when I was 21. I was supposed to be with my fiance. We were getting married in August, and it was like a picture-perfect love at first sight love. And I was supposed to be with him in Albuquerque, and at about 10 days before he died, I got very restless, and I wanted to go back to Chicago and earn as much money as I could for school. And he kept saying to me that he had premonitions that he was going to die and begged me to stay. And he wasn't, full of game. And here I am working in psychology in college, but off campus, I had a Wiccan high priestess, I had 2 medicine people, and a West African shaman who I was doing apprenticeships with.
Wow.
opening up, and I was supposedly, I mean, I say that, but because I didn't feel like it, I was very psychic, and I was working with tarot and numerology and, herbs and ceremony and energy and all this stuff. And I didn't feel anything like that in Sean's aura. And I kept teasing him and saying I was going to rub his nose in his words when I got back at the end of August. In fact, he called me 2 days before he died and begged me to come back. And it was midnight because I was working 2 jobs, and that's the only time he could get me, and he wouldn't hang up, and I hung up. And then 2 days later, he dies, and it was like I just went on such a tailspin. But then when I was upstairs, that made sense because he and I had come down from the same soul group to help facilitate. We had contracted to leave when I was 21. And I didn't go. I, at the last second, decided to jump my contract and stay on Earth. And so all those things kind of made sense to me. But when he died, it devastated me. And I remember I kind of took it out on one of my teachers when I came back because I went on a rant, like a 5 hours we talked. And I kept saying to her, how could I not see this? How could you not see this? How could you knew him, how could nobody see this? He knew it. And she tried to explain it to me, and I stayed with her another month working with her. But at the end of the day, I just walked away from it and said, it's a bunch of, hooey. It's a bunch of hogwash. It's a lie. I was faking it, or I was not faking it, but I was lying to myself. The power of suggestion.
Oh, yeah.
I went back into science at that point, and that was when I was 21, and then when I was 36 is when I got run over, and I went back into spirit at that point. Spent a lot of time in India trying to integrate human and spirit, in my brain, and just did a lot of soul searching and meditation.
Wow. And then at what point, time is going by super fast, so might have to, I don't want to say speed through the rest of this, but I also want to be mindful not to have an hour and a half interview, unless it has to be. We go with the flow here. But how did you end up starting to take clients, and what kind of work do you do with clients? Because I know you've been involved with neuro-linguistic programming, hypnosis, that whole realm. And can you talk a little bit about how you counsel people?
Well, the funny part was right after I came back and I finally got back to work and I started walking around the ranch and being Mrs. Tangerity Ranch again, our veterinarian left. We had a veterinarian for many years, and this new girl starts, and guess what? She's mystical, and a veterinarian. And then I'm walking down to the wrangling department one day, and there was a young woman standing there with a frame she had made out of swallow ribs that one of the cowgirls had ordered, but she had moved off to Wyoming by the time she got it done. So we started chatting, and I looked at her, and I said, you want to go riding? Do you know how to ride a horse? She was, yeah, she's a rancher. So we started going riding. She did tarot. She did all this. She's very mystical, and she and I started a very deep friendship, which is still today. And I just went back into my spiritual part, and I went back into the NLP and started getting back into my psychology part. And I love the archetypal imagery of the tarot, like Jung talked about and Joseph Campbell, and that's how I use it. It's more like taking guides on an inner journey, because one of the things that I found out very easily was we have many levels to our conscious, subconscious, and subliminal. And just like dogs on a dog sled, they all have to be pulling in the same direction.
Right.
And a lot of people that are stuck, it's like a couple dogs are pulling this way and a couple dogs are pulling that way. And I'm usually really good at tuning into their field, picking things up, and then giving them whatever homework is needed here's the tool. You can't do the bibbidi-bobbidi-boo. I mean, I know that there's...
Damn. Well, I want the magic wand. No, I understand.
You know what? There's a lot of very, very amazing people in India that do these energy transfers that blow your mind, but you still have to do the work. You still have to do the things. In fact, I'm putting my workshop into a workbook
Good.
And the first thing and it's a lot of journaling, because journaling, if you want to do something in half time, journal it, because your brain's connected to your skin. And when you write something down, you learn it twice as fast as when you just think about it or just talk about it.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. When I'm working as a psychologist, I give everybody a recording and I tell them to take notes. I mean, listen to it again, because in one ear, out the other is actually true about your brain. Mm-hmm. And take notes, and you listen to it again, and then maybe 2 weeks later you listen to it again, and you go through the course, and you learn so much quicker. You download it to where it's a permanent thing rather than just a possibility. It becomes more of a probability. Yeah, your brain's connected to your skin. They did a study well, never mind. I could go on.
You could.
But yeah.
We could go for a while. You've got me now left on the dogs and the dog sled. And are there common things, because I always like to leave listeners with some powerful tools. Are there some common things that we have out of alignment that you give as homework? I mean, are there some...
Well, I can tell you one of the things that really, really centered me quickly.
Okay.
Was I had met a monk from Mount Shasta, and he and I, he taught me the very simple thing. It's a very simple thing. It's just being mindful. In other words, if I'm ironing and I have the television on and I'm talking to my sister on the phone, my brain, we don't multitask. I know people think you can do 8 things at once. You don't. What your brain is doing is it's going jump, 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 jump. That puts an inordinate amount of stress in us. So now and this is one of the first things I did when I came back from India, is I just started doing one thing at a time. I mean, I still multitask other times. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I struggle like the best of them. But there are times during the day for at least an hour a day where I do one thing only, and that's all I do. And so if I'm ironing, I can have gentle, soft, without words music, because with words music affects your brain different than just instrumentals.
Okay.
And so I'll have instrumentals on as I'm ironing or as I'm doing the dishes, or I have no music. You can do it also with nothing on. Just do it.
Right.
It's focusing on one thing at a time and not daydreaming. I'm not ironing, daydreaming about my next lecture, my next workshop, the 3 people. I focus on what I'm doing, and I just keep my mind. I can't sit and meditate. I'm just not one of those people that can sit and zone out, I learned that in India. But there's movement meditations, and that's just, when they say mindfulness, all they're saying is focus on one thing. A lot of people don't understand what that means. And that really got me very, very centered and grounded very quickly, of keeping that peacefulness within me at all times. Because when I was remembering upstairs, which I do quite a bunch, I'm right back in that zone of that self-love. But then I'd have to get up and take care of my children and go check out a ride or do whatever I had to do. And I'd be human again. And it was almost like my spiritual part was like a satellite around me. So I worked to integrate them to where I'm human and spiritual, because it's almost like you're elevating humanity. You're elevating the human inside.
That's great. Your book's coming out soon.
Yes.
It's not out yet. And for listeners, keep an eye on We Don't Die Radio episode 110. As soon as it's out, I will have a link to it. But what kind of things are in your book?
Well, I go over in a lot of detail about the whole journey. I go into a lot more detail on how I integrated, and I give 2 very strong exercises in the book. I write about when I first channeled these exercises in that really helped me not take things personally, number 1, and number 2, not get caught up in the roles we play as humans, because I was identifying too much with the roles I was playing, and I was human. And those are going to be in the book so that everybody that reads it can take that home with them and practice it and begin to be in touch with. Everybody has an immortal soul. Every one of us does. It's just we're not aware of it. And ways of stilling the mind, it comes up. And it's something, I mean, I had to go get run over by a herd of horses to finally get centered. And you don't have to do that. You know, you can just do it yourself the easy way. Some people are more stubborn than others, I think.
Wow. I read somewhere on your website, on one of your courses, rewrite your life contracts.
Yeah.
Can we actually choose how it's going to go from this point forward?
Absolutely. I am absolutely not fatalistic. I mean, I'm a psychic. I'm very spiritual. I'm probably the least superstitious person you've ever met, except the Chicago Cubs. I really believe, I know we have free will. And the thing that the paradigm I believe in is reincarnation, and that was very evidenced upstairs. I mean, I shouldn't say that. I think of it now. I didn't think of it before. I didn't care about it before. That was just, we're here, we're died, that's it. Now, what I was shown was more a reincarnation model, which means that the soul sometimes will choose to take one lesson and break it into 3 or 4 lifetimes, because for them, that's like breaking high school into 4 years versus trying to do it all in a year and a half. And that's why when we see souls, we don't understand what they have chosen as their life contract. And if they fail, if they do choose to go from first to second grade and they blow it, they go back down to pre-K and then they relearn. The interesting thing is learning upstairs is as joyous and excited. People up there, the light beings up there, are so excited to learn, almost like we have vacation time down here. We love our leisure time. They love their learning time. So it appeared to me as if we do a lot of going over what we did, how can we educate ourselves, what can I learn, what can I practice. Then we come down here to take our tests, and then we go back upstairs again to process. The other thing is, the most hopeful thing I noticed was that everything is growing. I mean, to me, the divine source, which I ran into upstairs, which is indescribable, that love and that intense adoration that I felt coming from the divine is growing. As we evolve, it evolves. It's like God is not static. Now, I was raised Roman Catholic, and they have this very, specific way of looking at God being perfect. But in my dictionary, perfect means that's the end of the road. You don't have to do anything anymore. I didn't get that sense. I got that sense from the divine that it's evolving and growing as we are. Everything is growing, and it's not negative. It's growing in a good way.
Yeah. Gotcha. Leslie, could you just spend a couple minutes talking about your workshop on relationships? I'm a single gal myself. I know I'm not the only single person listening, and I love how you advertise it on your website. Are you tired of dead-end relationships? Whether they are a partner, family member, or at work, the pain and frustration of dead-end relationships takes a toll. And I know myself, like many other people, can attract the same kind of individual. And what is it that you offer? I mean, I'm assuming these are live workshops, or is it something online?
Well, I'm going to turn it into an e-course.
Yay! Good.
Yeah, I want to put it on an e-course because someone thought of it and told me, and I thought,
yeah, you get to a lot more people.
No, but I'm not technical, so I'll find.
You'll find a way.
Yeah, someone's already come forward who's going to put it into an e-course. Anyway.
But I'll be patient. But what role? What role do other people play, and what can we do to? Oh gosh, I mean, this is a whole nother interview, so I don't want to get too deep into it. But any words on relationships before we close?
The most important thing to realize is this: when you meet someone, whether it's a family member or an in-law or a romantic or friend or business, you must accept people as they are and stop trying to fix them. The biggest thing that I work with is the healers on the planet that always wind up being the teacher in the classroom, because they're not including themselves in their decisions. And there's a selfless love that makes us feel that true love conquers all, because that's what we were taught when we were little, and it doesn't. And one of the biggest things, and the reason this whole thing started with my workshops, was I had a woman, I was working as a therapist, and I had a client, and she was going through a divorce, her second one, and she looked at me, and she was half angry, half weepy, and said, when am I going to be happily married?
Mm-hmm.
As if it's carved in stone, and, I'm going to pull a card and tell her, oh, on this date, you know? And I looked at her, and I said, when you're already happy inside. And first of all, she had this fire flash through her eyes, like I thought she might, get up and leave. But she popped like a balloon. She just went, oh, because she was not a happy person, and she was looking to find her happiness outside of herself. My workshop is designed to, first of all, kind of go through our subliminal programming, which means we're 90% unaware of it, rewrite your view of relationship and the roles that you play, which is actually basically in a nutshell falling in love with yourself.
Wow.
Self-confidence is humble. Self-love is humble. Nobody that has true love is ever arrogant or bossy or conceited. Self-love is humble. And so I teach people to, first of all, include yourself in your decisions and also understand one critical thing. The world is a one-room schoolroom. Every person that you know is in a different grade. And in my workshop, I talk about going from pre-K to PhD. You can have someone who is intellectually a PhD, but emotionally, or even a business PhD, but emotionally they're still in third grade or kindergarten. And the point is, we have to be not making snap judgments to think we know them. We have to observe how they walk their talk and wade into relationships rather than jump in. And the second thing is remembering and thinking. A good place to start is think of your entire birth family, every cousin, everyone you knew, and just kind of think about who is my peer, who has the same level of personal and professional integrity that I have, who has the same level of maturity, responsibility, attitude. There's a lot of Eeyores out there with clouds over their head. Who's looking at the glass half full? And then you begin to look at, okay, those are the PhDs. And then you say, okay, here's a few that are still dysfunctional, melodramatic. That's maybe more high school. And here's some that are just total selfish little narcissistic, gobblers.
Yep.
Those are young souls. I can't go into first grade and be angry because I can't talk physics with a first grader. I have to accept them as they are. And actually, the funny part I always say in the workshop is, listen, when you open the box, if it says assembly required, put it back on the shelf. You do not want, at all, you do not want to have to fix them. I'm a psychologist. It's against the law for me to date my patients. And that's something I pound into people's heads. Don't ever date a patient again. And don't say to them, well, it would be great if they fix this. No, you take them as they are or you walk away.
Wow. Lesley, thank you.
You're welcome.
I want to go on and on and on. I want your book to be done. I want you to take your workshop right now from Massachusetts. I think this is going to be the beginning of a good friendship.
I think so, too.
Yeah, you're up to a lot of good, and I'm left with wanting to know more. But it is the end of the hour, so we are going to conclude. Do you have any closing words? Just of myself and listeners with just one positive something to get the dogs on track or something?
It's really recognizing. One of the things that always helps me is when I look at the bigger picture and watching the news and seeing the horrific things that happen. I always go back to the day I was born and I look at the shifts of consciousness that have happened since my birth. And there's many. And there's certain different web pages online that have optimistic news. And they're business people. They're not but they show all the positive things. Look at the whole picture. Don't despair over the small percentage of negativity. That's why one of the things I do is I always do a world consciousness, what's going on all over. Because the good guys don't get the headlines.
No, I always thought there should be GNN, the Good News Network, with all the people doing good deeds in the world.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you for being our guest. And to our listener that's taken the time to be with us this past hour, you have been listening to We Don't Die Radio. Our guest was the fabulous Lesley Lupo. Her website is lightthepath.com. And of course, you can always go to wedon'tdieradio.com. This was episode 110. And please feel free to join the Insiders Club too, because there's some secret special gifts, including reading my book for free and some other good things. So we'll definitely keep in touch with Lesley Lupo, and I'll keep you posted when her book is available, because that's something I want to find out more. So in closing, my name's Sandra Champlain. I've been your host on We Don't Die Radio. And like I often say, that I do believe that life is an education for the soul, and that your life here on earth is important. I love how Lesley said, be patient with others, keep your eye on the bigger picture. I love upstairs, be in heaven, downstairs where we are right now. And again, thank you for listening, and we'll see you soon.